What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Invest Iowa. Today, I have Megan Ahern, and today we're going to talk about flips, the staging companies, and how structuring a deal with your husband to get everything worked out and not have things that don't work properly because the expectations of one person over the other were not met. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So how can we get it started? Give me a little background on your story. I know that you've had multiple podcasts in which you talk about the same things, but just give me like the main points of how you became a real estate investor.
Sure. So we started in about 2015, 2016, bought a couple of houses while we were living in Southern California. One was a long distance flip that we lost money on, and the other was a live-in flip in Southern California. That actually did really good. We made like 80 grand on it. In 2018, my husband got medically separated from the Marine Corps. And so he was kind of forced into a position of all the jobs he was trained to do, he couldn't do anymore because he couldn't stand for more than 15 minutes at a time. And so we decided, like, do you want to go back to school? What do you want to do? You want to get like a job at a bank or what? And he just couldn't really wrap his head around any of those options. So we decided to move to Lincoln, Nebraska to go all in on real estate. We actually sold our house in California at that time and everything we owned, moved into a travel trailer and parked the trailer behind our flips for the first year, and just went all in on buying rentals was the main focus there. But we started flipping as well during that time. And then now going into where we're at now, we're just buying recently, the last couple of years, we've been buying probably about 16 houses a year. Some are flips, some are rentals. And then this year we're looking to get 20 more rental properties, and we'll probably flip another 5 to 10 houses.
Wow, that's impressive. So start living in the back of the flips. That's cool. How did those okay, first of all, why Nebraska?
Yeah, so we picked Nebraska because we wanted rental property and we just could not make the numbers work in California. So we were looking at markets that had good buy to rent ratios, but also wanted to find somewhere that was like safe because we wanted to live there. And a city that's big enough that has like all of the stuff. We didn't want a very small town. Lincoln stood out to us because it has 3 colleges, so it has a really strong rental market, and businesses are moving there, so the population is growing.
Okay. And then for the rental, you were looking more for a cash flow, or you were looking more to grow your equity in the homes and then refinance?
Both. So in the beginning, we were definitely looking for cash flow more than anything because we didn't have jobs when we moved there. And so we felt like if we could make big fat cash flow quickly, we could feel more secure in, buying a house and getting out of the trailer and just having that income. Now I think we probably focus more on like nicer assets. And so they may have a little bit less cash flow, but we know they're going to appreciate better over time and they're going to be a little bit more hands off to manage.
Okay, when you talk about those better assets, you mean better locations to buy in?
Better locations and just better buildings. So when we first moved there, we were buying a lot of like 100-year-old houses and in neighborhoods close to the college. So it was a lot of college rentals or college students renting from us, which then you have to turn those over every year, or maybe every 2 years if you get lucky, but it's just very hands-on management. And every time you turn over those college rentals, you have to teach a new batch of kids like how to work a thermostat and like how to clean up after themselves and all of these different issues that you don't really have to teach adults how to do. So it's just a lot more time consuming. And then the 100-year-old houses seem to break down a little bit more, even if you're going through and redoing everything. There's just weird problems that come up with 100-year-old houses.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But now for the staging company, at what timeline and at what point did that idea come to your mind?
So I started staging houses like 20 I don't know, 2018 or 2019, one of the first few projects that we did in Lincoln, I tried to hire a stager for. So we had blown out some walls and made it totally open concept. It was very spacious and nice, but I thought there's not like a really defined dining room area, but there's just pick a spot. You could put at the table anywhere. It was big. So I thought maybe it'd be smart to stage this house. So I called a bunch of stagers in town, and what I found was that they wouldn't give me a price over the phone, and it made me crazy. What they want to do is they want to charge you for a consultation, and they'll charge you like $80 to $100 for this consultation. But the consultation is where they'll actually tell you what the price is. And I'm like, it doesn't need to be this difficult. Is it $1,000 or is it $4,000? Like, just tell me. And if it's $4,000, like, we don't need to waste each other's time. I'm not going to do it, right? I can't afford it on a $169,000 house.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't even give me a ballpark. And I ended up not staging it because of that. We listed it, and the feedback that I got from all the agents and all the buyers was, well, there's no room to put a dining room table. And I thought, you guys just are not seeing the picture, because there's tons of room to put a dining room table. You just can't see it. So at that point, I'm like, okay, fine. I'll just stage my own houses. So I started staging my own houses around then, like maybe 2019. But also my husband is an agent. So I started staging his listings for him. And that was a good selling feature of like, hey, he's an agent. So if you list it with him, he'll stage it for free. And really it's me staging it for free on the back end, right? But he's getting listings that way. So I was just doing it for us, our properties, and also his listings.
A
And
win-win.
then yeah. And then in 2020, COVID happened. Obviously, everything shut down. I think it became a lot more important to make the house look really good in pictures, because people weren't going to come out of their house unless it was like really worth looking at. Right.
Right.
So I started staging for other clients in 2020.
And what is your process of storing this furniture, right? How do you keep track of what you're buying and what you're holding and what works and what doesn't?
Yeah. So everything that we do, I try to keep it like very neutral. Some staging companies will go like, they'll have these splashes of blue or splashes of yellow through the house. But what that does then is it makes it so that you have one set of furniture that can only go together. But then sometimes certain furniture doesn't fit in the houses or whatever. So you have to mix and match, which makes it more challenging to do that if you have in these splashes of color. So what I like to do is keep it really neutral, grays, beige, white, etc. Like if you're watching, you can see like white, white, white. So it all goes together, and it all kind of goes with whatever paint color they've chosen. And so that way we can mix and match a little bit better. And then the way we store it just in storage units, and we keep it very organized. And then the way that we run the staging business is that we have very systematized, almost like an ingredient list for our staging. So a living room is always going to have a rug, a sofa, a love seat, coffee tables, an end table, two plants, one on each end table, one in the centerpiece, and then two lamps on the end tables. So every single living room is the same essentially for us, just mixing and matching a little bit something different. But because of that, we can then go, okay, I need to buy one more set. It's going to cost me this much. So it's going to be paid off in X amount of times. And it just becomes an equation at that point where I don't have to design it. I can hire someone else to do it. And anyone who's like watched HGTV 4 times can then take that model and recreate it for themselves. And I don't have to be there staging houses.
So you don't train people to do this? You just expect them to watch YouTube videos and they...
No, but it's just, I think a lot of people have this perception of like, to work in a staging company or to be a staging company, you have to have this really epic design eye. And what I'm saying is you really don't have to, as long as there's the structure and the system in place.
Okay.
It's like McDonald's, right? Like you don't need to be a good chef to work the the fry basket at McDonald's because they have a very structured system. So you could teach a high school kid how to do it. It's the same with staging.
Okay. Um, how do you develop those systems? How do you take yourself out of being an employee to start actually? How do you take yourself out of that staging business?
Yeah. So first I had to make the systems, right? So in the beginning, I was staging and I kept just asking myself, like, when I started, I said, how do I make this the most simple as possible? Because simple sells and complex fails every time. So how do I make it the most simple? And then how do I structure that into a plan and into a process that other people can follow? And that's kind of a work in progress, right? At first it was like, okay, we need to make lists, like the checklist manifesto book. If you've read that, it's like make a checklist of all the things that you need. And then it kind of changed into, okay, now we have this Podio computer system, which essentially acts the same way as a checklist as well, of like, these are the things that need to go in the house. And then take that one step further of how do we then document that and document what the house looks like going in, so that maybe the person that goes and looks at the house originally to pick things for it doesn't have to be the same person that stages it. So if somebody calls out sick or it just happens to be a different person, can we all just fill in for each other? So that's where we're at now. And honestly, I live here in Maui now. And so my business runs completely without me because I have a full-time person in Lincoln staging and a part-time person in Omaha.
Wow. Let's talk about a little bit about the living in Maui. What's that like? I know that we were talking before we actually started recording on how you made that jump, but how has that changed your life? Has it changed the perception of real estate to you at all?
I It's really just like the fruition of all of our hard work, right? So when we moved to Lincoln, the plan was to work really stupid hard for 5 years and then be able to like travel full time. And we had actually, before we moved, picked out a 40-foot catamaran sailboat, sat in it, viewed it, and really picked it out. Like, this is the dream. We want to live on this 40-foot catamaran sailboat. And then in the meantime, we had two more kids, right? So we have three kids now. And I just think logistically, that seems really challenging to live on a sailboat. So maybe that's not the dream anymore. But we got to a point where we're like, hey, we had set a goal for X amount of dollars a month passively. We hit that. We set a goal to be millionaires. We hit that. And then we also have these other businesses that create big active income for us. And we've removed ourselves from the process of staging and flipping. So is it time to move now? And Brandon Turner, obviously he lives on Maui, but he was like, hey, you and Jeff should just move here. And I said, yeah, you know what, we should. And so we decided to move within the next, I think we decided a couple weeks later, and then we were moving 3 weeks later and just kind of fire sold all of our stuff and decided to come here. But yeah, it's beautiful here. I was probably working 100-hour work weeks in Nebraska, and now we work maybe 3 hours a day in the morning, and then we're off to be able to hang out with our kids and go to the beach and enjoy our life for the rest of the day. It's
Living the
really nice.
dream. How
Living
did
the
you
dream, man.
how did you build that relationship with Brandon or Bigger Pockets?
Yeah, so I had seen on his Instagram account that he was selling like a mastermind, and it was the last ticket available. It was a week before the mastermind, and I said to Jeff, I was like, dude, that would be so legit, like to go do this thing. And he's like, yeah, do it. And you had to apply and you had to be accepted. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be accepted, and I don't, this and that excuses, and we don't have the money and all the things. And he's like, just apply. And I was like, no, I'm not going to. So I'm laying in bed at night, like thinking about it, just like, dude, it'd be so cool. It'd be so cool. So I get up in the middle of the night and I'm sitting in the bathroom on the toilet in the dark so I don't wake up Jeff, and I'm applying for this thing. And then the very next morning, it's like, all right, you got accepted. Come on. And I'm like, okay, this is and it's like, send your money here, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, this is a scam for sure, man.
Yeah.
So I actually reached out to Jay Scott through his Facebook, And it was like, "Hey Jay, is this for real? Is this actually a thing?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's real. I'll be there." I'm like, "All right, cool." So I sent the money and I went, and that was about
How
two
much was
years
the
ago.
course? How much was the mastermind
The
at the time?
mastermind was $6,000. So honestly, it wasn't that much.
But
And it was
still,
really, it's not nothing. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And then you got to pay for your hotel and your flights and whatever. Um, but yeah, it was epic. And it was about 30 people. So really close knit. You really got to know everybody in the group. Um, really got to know Brandon well. And then we came back the next year and the next year, just got closer to him. So, yeah, it was really, really worth it, honestly.
And what did that teach you? What did that mastermind teach you?
A lot of it was about systematizing, my business. I think that's what I got a lot, out of that. So it's Brandon and Tarl, and those two guys, I don't know if you know them, but Tarl is very like, nuts and bolts, very specific, like very systematized. And Brandon is like very big ideas, like
The
fluffy,
visionary and the
the
integrator.
visionary and the integrator. So, um, from Tarl over the years, I've really learned how to systematize my flips so that I could remove myself.
Hmm.
Whereas I was going to my flips, I was the one like swinging a hammer for a long time. And so that really just elevated my mindset to be like, okay, you can do this in a way that is much easier on yourself and where you're not getting burnt out on it and you're
Hmm.
not having to be there all the time.
Right. And do you consider yourself a visionary or an integrator?
I'm definitely a visionary. Yeah.
Visionary. So you don't want to put the systems in place, but you have to.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm pretty decent at systems and I can really like push myself to integrate things. But I'm definitely a little bit more like ADD visionary, like, oh, let's do this. Oh, let's do that. And then Jeff is really like my worker bee, my husband, Jeff.
Yeah.
He's like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I'm like, all right, great. I can work with that.
Especially
Like
that
I
he
got
comes from
ideas.
the Marines, right?
It is. Yeah. He's,
Yeah.
he's good at taking orders and, that's a Marine Corps thing for sure.
He follows up. Um,
Yeah.
Tell me about the struggles that you think are worth mentioning that you have gone through that are your own battles. You know, everybody has their own battles. What do you think are remarkable stories that we should know about you?
One
Things that
is
you're proud of.
probably, yeah. One is that I was an addict and an alcoholic. Jeff was also, and we got sober 8 years ago. And that was such a huge catalyst, right? So we had started learning about real estate, but had got zero traction to that point. And we ended up giving our life to God and getting sober. And those two things was just like such a huge change in our lifestyle to be able to, not waste money on alcohol. For one, we were saving thousands of dollars a month,
Mm-hmm.
on that, and then not waste the time. And your mind is just so much more clear when you aren't just putting substances in it constantly, right? And
Yeah.
you can wake up early and you can be productive and you can start working out and doing all these things. So that was a huge catalyst for us. And then now we get to give back to that community, in a really cool way in which we own a lot of sober living houses.
Mm-hmm.
So we just bought our fourth one. And so that's essentially a community of guys that have committed to be sober. They've probably just gotten out of rehab or maybe prison, on drug or alcohol charges. And, yeah, just come together to support each other in a really cool community. And I love giving back to that. I love, making beautiful houses and providing beautiful houses for that program.
Do you think that you hit rock bottom or what changed in you? Because when that happened to you, I'd imagine there was somebody else that was going through the same that you were going through right now, but they're still in the same spot and you're here now at a different level. Um, what do you think that was different from those people to you?
Um, I think that me and Jeff coming to that decision together really helped. I think that, when you're getting sober by yourself, It's incredibly hard because your identity, like my identity was wrapped around like I am the party girl, right? Like that's who I am. Like what do I like to do? My hobbies are drink alcohol and go jet skiing and drink alcohol and do this and drink alcohol and go play pool. And like all of my hobbies, all of my life, all of my friends all revolved around that lifestyle. And so if I was doing it by myself, I think that my friends would suck me back into it. And I think that's probably a lot of what other people's issues are. But when we got sober, Jeff and I came to that conclusion together because we've always been best friends and we never really fought, but we would only fight when we were drunk. And it got to a point where we were always drunk. And so we were always fighting. And one night we got into a big fight over like something stupid, like playing a board game or something, just got way too heated.
Yeah.
And like flipping tables heated, right? Like, this is stupid. And it was like the next day, like, you know what? I'm not saying that I'm going to divorce you over this, but I am saying like if we keep going down this road, we won't be together forever. And like I can see that, right? We can both see that. And so we need to change. And I think that we loved each other enough to take that seriously. And haven't had a drink since then.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you don't look back ever since.
No,
not even a single bit.
Not even a single bit. I mean, every once in a while, like even just a couple years ago, we're like, but could we just have a drink now? Like, are we old enough to just have a glass of wine with dinner like normal people? And we're like, no, we're not.
No.
We can't do that. So we haven't tried, but I know that we're both the kind of people that take things too far, to the extreme, and we do it all the way or not at all. And so we just need to choose to not do it at all. But that addictive personality is also what makes us like uber successful, right? Like, I have now just changed my addiction from alcohol to working out and to real estate. And so it's made me skinny and wealthy. It's like, that's way good.
Did the tattoos come as a plus when you got into real estate, or were you having those before?
I had those before for sure, but I was always kind of like cautious to not go below my elbow because I had like jobs before where I would just wear like a, long sleeve shirt, be able to roll it up or whatever. And then now at this point, I'm like, oh, I don't care. I'm never working for anybody. I'm getting blasted. I'm getting hand tats. I don't care.
When you decided to take this major decision that now we're talking about that changed your life, what about your friends? What about the people that you were close with, that were in the path that you decided you no longer were going to take?
I think you find out very quickly that you don't actually have a lot of friends. You have a lot of drinking buddies. And if you aren't drinking anymore, they don't want to hang out with you. And that's hard, right? You feel very alone. And I went through a big depression after I quit drinking because I did feel like I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a true identity. And so you have to wrestle through all of that, which I think is why the Oxford House, the program that we work with for our sober living houses, it's so helpful because you have a community then, right? You have friends that are also not sober or that are also sober now and that have gone through that, and be able to like speak that identity into you and be able to suggest things to do that don't revolve around alcohol. And it's a hard struggle though for a little bit.
All of those struggles, I think, are the conversations, and not only for alcohol or like substances, right? Like in general, like all of those are the conversations that everybody should have before getting into real estate. I think if you don't have your life figured out, you can't have your financial life figured out at the same time. And that's played a main role into most of the people that I have on the podcast that are widely successful, like top of whoever I've been able to have a conversation with. They all start with the spiritual and the self-improvement as part of their journey to become later on financially successful. But it all starts with the why. And you just proved it again one more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about a little bit of the flips that you're working on and a little bit of the systems now, just so I can get a better understanding of how could people get started into placing systems. Give me a brief description of how systems have changed the way that you flip and you hold properties.
Okay. So one of the big things that I changed recently is that I used to totally design each flip differently. And it was kind of fun, and they do it on HGTV, and it's just not very realistic though. Like if you're running a hobby, fine. If you're running a business, you need to systematize it. So now all of our flips look almost exactly the same. We might tweak a little thing here or there because we're keeping something in the house. But for the most part, they're going to be very systematized. And so that allows our GCs to know what we're doing and what we expect of them. And it allows my project manager to know what we're doing. Like it allowed me to remove myself from that role. Um, and the same with our rentals. We do our rentals almost exactly the same as our flips. The only difference probably would be our sober living houses. We don't put any carpet in them. But for the most part, it's just all systems. And then we use Podio to manage the projects and to be able to communicate between myself, my project manager, Jeff, my VA, everybody is communicating on that same thread. So when we're talking about a certain property, it should be all within that area, which allows for us to not be like double communicating. Like I have to reach out to Natasha. Natasha reaches out to Alvaro. She should just already have that conversation and then put it in a Podio so I can just read it. And then I get daily updates through that program as well. And then as far as like our books, obviously bookkeeping is so important when you're flipping. We do everything through QuickBooks, but you have to really keep up on that to know where are you at in your flips. I think a lot of people that get started in flipping or maybe even have done flipping for a while, but they're not like really up to date on their books. Because that's not the fun part, right? Like keeping your books sucks. It's so tedious and monotonous. And so then what happens is you end up selling a property and you think you made like 30 grand, but maybe what you actually made was 20 grand when you factor in like closing costs and commissions and holding costs and all these kind of like hidden fees that you're not really thinking about. And I think a lot of flippers in the beginning get to be kind of behind the gun before they realize it and they think they're making money. And so they're doing more and more flips. But what they're really doing is just like robbing Peter to pay Paul on the next flip and the next flip. And they're not actually making as much as they think they are.
Okay. How do you, okay, I'd imagine that you're talking from experience. Those systems that now you're putting in place are playing a role into also holding those properties, or is this only for the flips?
They play a role in that too. Being able to do my flips in a systematic way allows me to just apply that same system to my BRRRR properties, right? So even the rentals that I'm keeping, I'm gonna be completely remodeling them from the beginning and then refining them once I get it rented out. So we're running our flips essentially the same way as our rentals, I should say, as the same way as our flips. We're just keeping them at the end.
What's your buy box for these rentals?
So the way that we buy is I say that I have to be all in at 75% of the ARV, which includes, the purchase price and then the rehab, holding costs, etc. And then if it cash flows at a 25-year AM, and probably we're like at 7.5% interest right now, then I'll keep it. But if it doesn't cash flow, I just flip it. So I'm running kind of the same numbers in the beginning, but just if it cash flows, I keep it. If it doesn't, it's a flip.
Okay, how come 75%? How do you come up with that number?
Our lenders will lend 80% ARV. Um, and so if I can shoot for 75 and go over a little bit in the budget, I'm still fine. Um, but our lenders, super cool. I don't know if they do this in Iowa. I've been talking to a lot of like national investors that seem like this is not a thing, but most people they buy it on hard money or something, or they borrow the purchase price or the down. They have to put some amount of money down into it. But what my lenders are doing is they'll take a spec appraisal, and I'll walk the property with the appraiser and say, hey, these are the repairs that we're going to do. This is the budget for it. And they'll appraise based off of what it will be when I'm done with it. They'll give me a spec appraisal, ARV number essentially. And my bank will lend 80% of that. So they'll lend the entire purchase, and then they'll set up a line of credit for the rehab. So I'm literally bringing no money to the table when we're closing. They're paying for closing costs and everything. And then they're setting up that line of credit for me to do the repairs on. So I can do that flips or burrs with literally none of my own money on bank financing. And we were doing that at 4% when the interest rates were good, and we're at like 7.5% with them now, but it's way, way, way better than, hard money or those sort of things.
Maybe that's the difference between having a relationship with the bank and not having it, and also going to your local banks instead of your big um $500 companies in the
Yeah.
US. That probably it, because I have also seen it in Iowa. Now for those, so you're only coming up with you're pretty much in the property with no money or little money, right?
Yes. Yep.
What are you buying in terms of flips? Heart rehab, cosmetics, lipstick. Well,
I'll do whatever.
go.
I'm a, yeah, I'll pretty much do whatever. I will say that my favorite is like the little old lady houses, I call them. Because they take good care of them. If the roof starts leaking or it gets old, they hire the best contractor and get it replaced. Water heater, etc. They're paying good money for good stuff. But it's probably 30-year-old carpet and 50-year-old kitchen in there. So they know that it needs a full update. They sit around and watch HGTV and know that like this is not what people are wanting to buy. So they're a little bit embarrassed by it and they're willing to take less because it's more convenient. Um, but if you buy like a slumlord house and it's just like shoddy work all the way through for years, it's it's harder to turn those around, and they just you find all these hidden surprises of like just chachi work. It just sucks. Those ones
Right.
suck, but I'll do them.
In terms of acquisitions, how are you acquiring these leads and how are you finding these houses?
We have a pretty strong like Facebook presence, so we get a lot of leads through our networking, through people we know, and people that follow us on Facebook. And then we get some through our bandit signs. Every time I buy a house, I put a bandit sign in the yard. I don't like the pepper 'em all around the city. I feel like it looks trashy. Um, and the city ends up getting on you, but we'll put them in our own yards. So we get deals from that. And then we're also doing like pay-per-click leads or pay-per-click ads, and getting some through like we've tried text blasting or cold calling. I feel like those kind of work for a little while and then it seems to taper off. Um, but yeah, throwing crap at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, the text blasting is definitely not reliable. I know that there's a guy that's done on average 30,000 uh texts, and out of that he only closes one deal.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be
Yeah, I think about a
overwhelming.
year ago we were doing it and we were just killing it in there. And then I feel like what happens sometimes is maybe because we're hyper local, we'll do something like text blasting and then I'll be like, "Oh, this is working so good." And I tell all my flipper friends in Lincoln and then they all try it and then it's like too many people, too
Saturated.
many hands in the pot, yeah.
Hmm. Okay. And then what are your expectations in the next 5 years, let's say? Where do you think you're gonna get at?
Hmm. In the next 5 years. That's so far out, man. I think we'll probably have around 200 units, rental units by then, and I would like to start opening locations for my staging company, either franchising or maybe partnering with local operators in other locations. And I'd like to have about 300 locations across the US in the next 5 years.
Wow, that's a big goal.
That is a big goal.
Yeah. What's the best way to reach out to you for anybody that has any questions or would like to know more about you?
Instagram, I am the Tatty Investor. That's probably the best way to reach out.
Megan, thank you so much for this interview. It was fun.
Yeah.
Got to learn about Hawaii and staging. That was super interesting. I appreciate all the knowledge that you have poured onto me today.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you get made it this far to this video, subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll see you guys on the next one.